Carly Simon wrote "You're So Vain" in 1972, and it destroyed relationships across Hollywood. The song hit #1, but the mystery nearly drove people crazy. Carly Simon tortured fans with clues for 50 years. She confirmed Warren Beatty was part of it, hinted at David Geffen. But she kept the biggest secret hidden. The song wasn't about one man. It was about 3 different affairs. One happened while her husband was away. Another involved the man singing backup vocals. The third name she whispered will break the internet. After 5 decades, the truth is finally out. Carly Simon came into the world on June 25, 1945 in New York City, and her life began in a house where privilege looked beautiful on the outside but felt unsteady on the inside. Her father, Richard L. Simon, co-founded Simon & Schuster, and their home in Riverdale carried the sound of Chopin and Beethoven drifting from the piano each morning. Her mother, Andrea, was a jazz singer and a civil rights activist, so the house was always filled with talk about art and justice. Carly grew up with Joanna, Lucy, and Peter, siblings she loved deeply, and all 3 would later die from cancer, leaving her with memories that stayed heavy in her heart. Even with all that beauty around her, the home pulsed with tension. Her parents fought often, and rumors about her mother's affairs made the walls feel thinner each year. That mix of comfort and chaos shaped the way Carly understood love, trust, and the kind of ache that slips into music before you even realize it. Then something happened that cracked her childhood open. When Carly was 7, she said she experienced something so shocking she called it heinous. Billy, the teenage son of her parents' friends, assaulted her over several summers. At first he watched her older sister Lucy, then he turned to Carly. She told her sisters, but they didn't believe her and brushed it off as attention-seeking. Her mother eventually banned Billy from the house, but only for a month, and that response stunned Carly later in life. The abuse left her confused about sex and stripped away the innocence that should have been hers. She tried to romanticize the moments in her mind just to survive them. That wound stayed with her and shaped her writing, filling her work with a kind of honesty people instantly felt, even if they didn't know why. Long before she became a star, she was just a little girl struggling to speak. At 5, she began to stammer so badly that sentences tangled in her throat. Therapy didn't fix it. The breakthrough came when her mother suggested something simple. Sing the words instead. Tap a rhythm. Let the fear fall behind the melody. Around the dinner table, if Carly hesitated over a request, she would tap her leg and sing it softly. Singing freed her, and soon she realized music was the one place where the stammer couldn't touch her. It gave her a voice long before fame did. Even in adulthood, the stammer crept back whenever pressure built, but the rhythm that saved her as a child never left. In 1960, when Carly was 15, her father died at 56. His heart had been weak for years, and depression shadowed him more than she understood at the time. When he was gone, the house felt empty in a way she couldn't name. The loss hollowed her out and deepened her anxiety. Her mother's activism kept the home busy, but Carly felt adrift. She recognized parts of her father's sadness inside herself, and that awareness followed her for years. It traveled into her songwriting, where grief and longing became threads that held entire songs together. One of the few places where her heart slowed down was Martha's Vineyard. Family trips to the island felt like sunlight after storms. The air was calm, and the rhythm of the ocean gave her a break from the tension she lived with in New York. She loved it so much, she eventually bought property there. The island became her place to breathe, and many of her lyrics carried pieces of those summers. It was where she learned that beauty and pain could live side by side, and that the mix could turn into music people never forget. By the time she reached her teenage years, her world was still wealthy, but painfully lonely. At 11, she was already writing songs to escape the noise of her parents' arguments. She hid in her room with her guitar. At 13, panic attacks started showing up. They grew worse after her parents' divorce and her mother's depression. Music kept her steady, but the fear never fully left. In 1962, when she was 16, she won a talent show at her private school, and for a moment, the applause felt like medicine. But by 17, she was fighting depression again, and stage fright began to follow her everywhere she performed. The honesty in her songs came directly from those years, and listeners felt it. She tried college for a moment. In 1963, at 17, she enrolled at Sarah Lawrence College. It was prestigious and calm, but she didn't feel at home there. Anxiety made it hard to sit through classes. Depression shadowed her mornings. Music was the only thing that made sense. So in 1964, she dropped out, even though her family expected a different life for her. Leaving college gave her freedom, but also pushed her deeper into her internal battles. She kept writing, kept singing, kept searching for a place where her voice could live. In 1964, she formed the Simon Sisters with Lucy. They recorded an album that included Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod, a song that hinted at the poetic style Carly would later perfect. They performed at colleges and festivals, but every show was a tug-of-war between her love for music and the stage fright tightening her chest. When Lucy married in 1967, the duo ended, closing a chapter that had taught Carly discipline, harmony, and the courage to keep going even when fear tried to silence her. Her anxiety pushed her into therapy, where she faced the childhood trauma and the teenage assault she carried. Music became the safest place for her feelings, and she let her vulnerability spill onto paper. Her honesty was unusual for the time, but it saved her. It also made her stand out. Fans later said they felt like she was singing their secrets, not just her own. When the Simon Sisters ended, she moved to London in 1967. London opened her world. She wrote her first solo demos. She studied the work of Cat Stevens, Joni Mitchell, and other rising songwriters. She met people who understood her style and encouraged her to experiment. The city let her grow, and she absorbed everything she could from the creative scene. Her first real taste of the industry came earlier, in 1966, when she signed with Albert Grossman, the manager behind Bob Dylan. He had big plans, including a solo album with the band, but the project was scrapped without warning. It felt like betrayal. It also taught her that the industry could lift you up one moment and drop you the next. Instead of giving up, she kept writing. She filled journals with lyrics about heartbreak, confusion, and the fragile threads of relationships. She waited tables in Greenwich Village to survive. Every night, she returned home with a notebook full of ideas. Her honesty drew people in. Slowly, the folk scene began to notice her, and she started finding her place. Everything shifted between 1969 and 1971. In 1970, she signed with Elektra Records after Jack Holtzman heard her demo. Her debut album came out on February 9, 1971. It reached number 30 on the Billboard 200, and her first hit, That's the Way I've Always Heard It Should Be, climbed to number 10 on the Hot 100. The song stirred conversations because it talked about marriage in a way people didn't expect. It carried pain, fear, and honesty. Radio stations hesitated at first, but listeners wanted truth, and Carly gave it to them. In 1972, she won the Grammy for Best New Artist at 25. She beat acts like Jethro Tull and Chicago. Critics called it a shock, but her emotional clarity set her apart. Her victory proved that confessional songwriting was powerful, especially for a young woman navigating an industry dominated by men. As her fame grew, she worked with people like Livingston Taylor and others in the early 70s folk scene. The friendships were meaningful, but sometimes complicated. Romantic tension and competition added pressure, which pushed her anxiety even higher. She kept making music, and in November 1971, she released Anticipation. It reached number 30 on the Billboard 200. The title track rose to number 13 on the pop chart and number 3 on the easy listening chart. By 1973, the album went gold with more than 500,000 copies sold. The song later became the theme for The Today Show, and suddenly millions were hearing her voice every morning. Carly Simon's rise in the early 1970s felt smooth on the surface, but once you look closer, everything starts connecting in a deeper way. It begins in 1972, when her album No Secrets came out and quietly shifted her entire life. The album hit number 1 on the Billboard 200 and crossed 2 million copies, which was unbelievable for someone who had just been pushed to change producers. Paul Buckmaster had been rejected by Elektra Records, so Carly agreed to work with Richard Perry, even though she wasn't fully sure about him. But once they walked into Trident Studios in London during September and October of 1972, something started to spark. Perry pushed her to lean into a rawer sound, something sharper and louder than the softer folk she had been known for. And the honesty that came out of her was so real that even the album cover, shot at the Portobello Hotel in Notting Hill, looked like a confession. By the time the album reached listeners on November 28, 1972, it carried the weight of her breakups and her complicated affairs. It stayed at the top for 5 weeks and quietly set the stage for one song that the whole world would soon fight over. While she was still riding that wave, another moment came together almost by accident. You're So Vain was being recorded at the same Trident Studios, but the process stretched over 3 different sessions. Richard Perry kept trying to catch a certain slow build, something that felt like a heartbeat rising. Drummers came and went. Then one day, Mick Jagger walked in. He was dating Carly's sister at the time, and he happened to be hanging around. Carly asked him to add backing vocals, and he agreed. The moment he stepped into the booth, something almost playful sparked between them. The chemistry was obvious, and the track picked up this electric edge. His voice can still be heard at around the 1-minute 44 mark, and again at 3 minutes 26 seconds, even though it stayed uncredited for years. When the song came out on January 13, 1973, it shot to number 1 for 3 straight weeks and sold over 1.1 million copies. The mystery behind it only pushed it further. People listened frame by frame, trying to guess who the song was really about. The guessing became its own storm. Everyone wanted to know who You're So Vain pointed fingers at. Some said Warren Beatty. Some said Mick Jagger. Others whispered about James Taylor. In 2003, Carly told Dick Ebersol under a private agreement that one part of the song referred to Warren Beatty. Beatty joked for years that the whole thing was about him, but Carly only confirmed the second verse. The rest stayed hidden. Even in 2024, she admitted that each verse referred to different men. That secrecy kept the fire alive. She even auctioned off the full truth for $50,000 in 2003 for charity, which only added to the drama. Women's magazines sometimes attacked her, calling her vindictive, but the song earned a Grammy nomination and placed her right on the edge of a feminist movement that was still forming. She had opened a door no one else had dared to touch. But while the music world was spinning with excitement, Carly's life kept shifting in more personal ways. Her critics were loud, but so were the crowds. The success of No Secrets and You're So Vain meant constant touring. and the exhaustion behind it slowly stacked up. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, she went to Martha's Vineyard for a quiet break. James Taylor, her ex-husband, suddenly proposed again, and for a moment, it felt like life was folding in on itself. The marriage didn't last, but the moment caught everyone's attention. Fame and love kept mixing in ways she couldn't control. Even the smallest lyric details started causing waves. One of the biggest shocks came from the apricot scarf line. It wasn't fiction. She had gone on an eclipse trip with a lover who wore an apricot scarf, and that scarf became a symbol of everything she wanted to expose about male vanity. Audiences in the 1970s weren't used to such sharp honesty. Suddenly, writers across the industry realized that a simple detail could shatter illusions. The scarf became a kind of cultural shorthand for the way Carly pushed boundaries. During this same period, she got married to James Taylor on November 3, 1972. The ceremony happened in her Manhattan apartment with a judge and about 100 guests. It was spontaneous. Taylor had questioned the need for marriage earlier in the day, then changed his mind before sunset. The wedding turned into headline news. Two major folk rock stars tied together at the height of their careers. Carly felt safe with him at first, but problems arrived almost immediately. Taylor toured non-stop, and soon his heroin addiction surfaced. Tension filled their home. The arguments became louder. Reporters sensed the trouble behind the scenes, and the pressure of fame made everything worse. Still, Carly kept creating. In 1974, she released Hotcakes, and everything hit at once. The album came out on January 11, 1974, reaching number 3 on the Billboard 200, right behind Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan. Mockingbird, her duet with James Taylor, reached the top 5 and sold over 500,000 copies. The album stayed on the charts for 8 months and even outsold Dylan's record that year. Its cover showed Carly in a maternity dress, a quiet hint of the life she was stepping into because she had just given birth to her daughter Sally on January 7, 1974. But joy was followed by pain. After Sally's birth, Carly fell into severe postpartum depression. The exhaustion, the pressure, the expectations, everything came crashing in. She later said that it shaped her songwriting and led her into deeper emotional places, creating songs like Forever My Love. Female artists in the 1970s rarely talked about these things, but Carly did. Her honesty made other women feel seen. Her next major shift arrived in 1975, with Playing Possum. The album came out on April 8, 1975, and reached number 10 on the Billboard 200. Its cover caused a stir. Carly stood there in a black negligee and knee-high boots, and suddenly newspapers wanted to talk about image, not music. Attitude Dancing reached number 25, and fans slowly adjusted to this edgier version of her. At the same time, the best of Carly Simon came out and eventually went triple platinum. Her career kept rising even when her confidence wavered. Then the weight of public opinion started pressing harder. By 1975, she had gained some weight, and magazines mocked her for it. Their cruelty pushed her into a short but painful eating disorder. She poured these struggles into songs like Slave. Her honesty sparked conversations about body image that were rare back then. It was uncomfortable, but it made her stronger. In 1976, she toured with Linda Ronstadt, reaching even larger crowds. She released Another Passenger in June 1976, an album produced by Ted Templeman, with contributions from the Doobie Brothers. It reached number 29 on the Billboard 200, but the industry was shifting toward disco, and mature pop rock was pushed aside. Songs like It Keeps You Runnin' stalled on the charts. Still, her ambitions stayed clear. Carly Simon released Boys in the Trees on April 4, 1978, And the moment it came out, something in her world seemed to rise again. The album climbed to number 10 on the Billboard 200 and went platinum by August, which meant more than 1 million copies sold in the United States. You Belong to Me moved through radios everywhere and reached number 6 on the pop chart. It became her 5th top 10 hit and even earned her a Grammy nomination for Best Pop Vocal Performance, Female. And when she sang Devoted to You with James Taylor and watched it reach number 36, people could hear that her voice had grown warmer and deeper, shaped by strings that curled around her like a soft wind. The success felt sweet, yet something underneath was shifting. During all of this, her marriage to James Taylor was breaking apart piece by piece. While she worked on Boys in the Trees, tension kept slipping into the room. Rumors of his infidelity moved through the air, and fans whispered about their fading bond. Even the duet that sounded tender on the surface carried shadows no one could see. Later, her memoir from 2015 hinted at secrets and pain she had buried for years, and you could feel how their 11-year marriage was coming undone while she kept singing about love, loss, and quiet longing. Then came 1980. She moved to Warner Brothers and released Come Upstairs. It reached number 36, and the sound was bold and different. Producer George Massenburg brought synthesizers into her world, something she had never touched before. Jessie became the standout, climbing to number 11. All of this happened while she filed for divorce from James Taylor in 1981, so the album carried the voice of someone shifting, someone stepping into a new version of herself, while the past still tugged at her shoulders. In 1981, she released Torch. It was filled with jazz standards and sad, beautiful Torch songs. Rolling Stone called it gorgeous. Critics loved it, but the album only reached number 50 because the music world had turned toward MTV and bright pop. She recorded from the heart during her divorce, and the song cut deep. Torch ended up becoming one of those albums that critics remember fondly, even if the charts didn't. But then, 1983 arrived with a blow that cracked her world open. Her business manager, William Starr, had stolen $5 million from her. The money vanished into bad investments and a Ponzi scheme. She had to sell her Martha's Vineyard home. She had to fight through lawsuits and betrayal. Starr later pleaded guilty in 2010 for a larger scam totaling $30 million involving multiple victims. But for Simon, the damage had started long before. She had to rebuild her finances from zero, and the shock stayed with her for years. Still, people kept returning to Nobody Does It Better. Released in 1977, the Bond theme had reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and sold more than 2 million copies worldwide. It gave her an Oscar nomination and a Golden Globe nomination. Even though she lost both awards to You Light Up My Life, the song became a global anthem and lifted her career during a quiet spell. It stayed one of the most iconic Bond themes ever, and it held her in the public eye even when other parts of her life were falling apart. In 1987, she rose again with Coming Around Again. It reached the top 25, her first time back there since 1978. The title track reached number 25 in the United States and number 18 in the United Kingdom. She also married poet James Hart that same year, and their marriage lasted until 2007. The song became part of a beloved live special from Martha's Vineyard, and the momentum carried her toward Let the River Run. That song won her an Oscar, a Golden Globe, and a Grammy, a rare trio that marked one of the brightest points in her career. Yet behind the scenes, darker memories lingered. In 1986, she experienced bullying from Harvey Weinstein during a film score negotiation. He screamed, threatened, and left her shaken. When the world learned of his abuses after the Me Too movement in 2017, Simon added her voice. Her story became part of a much larger truth about power and brutality in the entertainment industry. Then, in 1990, she released My Romance. It reached number 46 and stayed on the chart for 17 weeks. She chose lush orchestral arrangements by Marty Page, and the album turned standards like In the Wee Small Hours of the Morning into scenes that felt like film. That version later appeared in the 1993 movie Sleepless in Seattle. With players like Michael Brecker and Marvin Stamm joining her, the album gave her a fresh wave of adult contemporary success and marked another turn in her creative life. But the hardest chapter wasn't career-related. In October 1997, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She had ignored a lump for years, and now she had to face surgery and chemotherapy. She went public in May 1998 and became a voice for early detection. She co-founded the Simon Foundation and helped raise more than $1 million for awareness. Her courage turned private pain into public strength. In 1994, she released Letters Never Sent. It came from a box of unsent letters to past lovers, including Warren Beatty. The album reached number 129, but critics admired it deeply. Like a River honored her mother and Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, who both died from cancer that year. Simon was peeling back layers of memories and therapy sessions and grief, and the music became a record of all the wounds she carried. That same year, she performed with James Taylor at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame ceremony. The reunion carried tension, but it captured a story only the two of them understood. By 1997, she returned with Film Noir, which reached number 84. It had a smoky, moody tone, and she released it while still dealing with her cancer diagnosis and her growing advocacy. It showed how she could blend personal hardship with artistic control. Then came Moonlight Serenade in 2005. It reached number 7, her highest chart position since 1978. It earned her a Grammy nomination and sold 58,000 copies in the first week. But the years around it were painful. Her brother Peter died in 2005. Her sisters Lucy and Joanna died from cancer only days apart in 2007. She filled her music with their memory and kept touring with her children, Sally and Ben, turning grief into something soft enough to share. In 2010, she released a new version of You're So Vain, with a whisper that sounded like the name David. Played backward, it became clearer, and people wondered if it meant David Geffen. Her publicist said it could mean many people. That single whisper pushed the mystery forward once again, especially since she had already revealed Warren Beatty as the man in the second verse. The guessing game continued because she wanted it that way. Loss kept shaping her art. She had been close to Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis and even sang at her funeral in 1994. Losing all her siblings by 2007 left her searching for healing in therapy. Boys in the Trees, her 2015 memoir, showed the true weight she had carried. Her own cancer treatments had already changed her life once, and these later losses carved her even deeper. But her writing grew richer with every scar. Her legacy kept expanding. She was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1994. She sold more than 25 million records worldwide. Taylor Swift performed You're So Vain with her in 2013. The song entered the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2004. She was even considered for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Her influence stretched far beyond her chart positions, shaping the way confessional songwriting lived in modern music. By 2025, she was 80 and living quietly on Martha's Vineyard. She painted. She wrote. She dealt with hearing loss after surgery complications in 2019. Her voice, once the centerpiece of her world, was now something she protected gently. Even so, she kept creating in new ways, showing how artists adapt when the body grows fragile. Then, in 2023, she surprised everyone again. She revealed a brief affair with John Travolta during the years he filmed Grease. The confession added another twist to the mystery around her songs, especially You're So Vain. It fit the pattern of how she lived, keeping truth and story close together, so the world could see one piece, but not the whole picture. And in 2024, she raised $75,000 at a charity auction by selling a whisper clue from You're So Vain. She turned mystery into generosity, keeping fans curious while supporting good causes. The song stayed alive because she wanted it to. Every clue pulled people back in, proving that some stories never fade.